Hello, my friends and fellow travelers. My name is Pierce. This is my channel, Tales from the Road. Thanks so much for stopping by. And welcome to beautiful southern Italy, where I'm living for the next couple months. Today, however, we are not talking about Italy, but we are talking about a nation that is just across the Adriatic Sea called Bosnia. Bosnia and Herzegovina, to be specific. Bosnia is actually one of the coolest nations in Europe that I've personally been to. It's something remarkably different, culturally speaking, than many of the other countries that you're going to find in this subcontinent. That being said, if you're going to Bosnia this year, this is the ultimate travel guide for you. I'm going to tell you the tips and tricks, some hidden gems along the way that can make sure that you have an awesome trip to this really, really cool, under-traveled country. If that sounds good, let's get into the Bosnia business. But before we hop into the Bosnia business, I want to tell you about the sponsor of this video, the International Drivers Association. And to tell you more about it, I'm going to hop into my rental car in a foreign country because we're talking about international driver's permits. Let's hop in the car. So as an American, I've been driving my whole life, and I actually got my driver's license when I was only 15 years old. That means when I go to other countries, I always like to drive, rent a car, explore the beautiful countryside, and go to places that you can't typically go by bus or by train. Many people think they can just show up to another country and use their license, but that is definitely not true. If you get pulled over by a police officer, which has of course happened to me on the road a couple times in sketchy situations in Central Asia or in valid situations here in Europe, while you think your license is valid, it may not actually be valid in the country that you're driving in. Just because they rented you a car doesn't mean that the government, the authorities, they actually think that your license is legit. I've partnered with the International Drivers Association, and they hook you up with one of these, an international driving permit. And this guarantees you an internationally accepted license in over 165 countries. Now, that's a pretty good deal. Getting your driver's license converted into an international driver's license is always a pain. You have to go into like a brick and mortar establishment, you have to bring a passport photo and other information, and you may need to wait in a line, which could take an hour or 5, who knows. Luckily, the International Drivers Association has made this process incredibly easy. You just fill out their simple online form, you upload your passport photo, and then you wait for the thing to get shipped to your house, and then you get something like this, an actual permit which is translated into 12 international languages, so you'll be covered when you travel abroad. This thing is a lifesaver abroad. If you get pulled over, if you're trying to rent a car and they don't want to give it to you for some reason because they don't think your license is valid, if you lose your actual ID and you have this as a backup in your backpack, it's always a good thing to travel with. And the great part is that if this gets lost, it gets pickpocketed, they also send you a fully valid digital copy, which you can keep as a PDF on your computer or your phone. If you want to cruise around the world the legit way, get your IDP today by checking my link in the description. Type in Tales from the Road 10 and you're going to get 10% off your next purchase. Now that we're ready to travel, let's talk about Bosnia. As we always do with these videos, let's talk a little historical and geographical background so we get to know Bosnia a little bit better before we go. So first up, where is Bosnia on the map? And what is Bosnia? It's actually a pretty fair question because the current status of Bosnia is quite complicated. Geographically speaking, Bosnia is located in the Balkan Peninsula, and the Balkan Peninsula, of course, is the southeastern part of Europe that touches the Anatolian Peninsula and Turkey. Bosnia is bordered by a couple of other countries that are pretty well known, Croatia to the north and Serbia to the east, as well as Montenegro, a really cool country, but of course less traveled by Americans, to its south. Historically speaking, Bosnia, as well as the rest of the Balkan Peninsula, has an incredibly diverse and long history. Many people have been coming through this region, conquering, making cities, getting reconquered, and all that jazz. That being said, the important thing that you need to know about Bosnia that's different than many of the other countries in the region is that Bosnia today is 51% Islamic, specifically with its Bosniak population, and this really stems from the time that the Balkan Peninsula was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Going into Bosnia, to its capital Sarajevo, to its maybe most beautiful city Mostar, you're going to find a lot of Ottomanization within the mosques, within the culture, within the food, and it's very noticeable in comparison to the other Balkan countries that surround it, with the Croatians being typically Catholic and the Serbians being Orthodox Christian. Bosnia and Herzegovina today is very culturally diverse, with the Bosniak population being the majority, but still large sections of Croat and Serbs living in Bosnia, making it multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and very interesting. The Ottoman period lasted for nearly 400 years in Bosnia, but more recent history that is more pertinent to a visit to Bosnia is, of course, that Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was assassinated by sort of Serbian militants in Sarajevo, which prompted World War I, and you can actually go to the bridge in Sarajevo where this happened. Out of the European changing wars that defined the first half of the 19th century, Bosnia found itself in a unified Yugoslavia, a state that was developed to unify Southern Slavs under one banner and have its capital in Belgrade, Serbia. This is, of course, important for a lot of reasons, for the movement of people, for the spreading of religions, for the unification of food, of culture in many of these southern Slavic states that were a part of Yugoslavia. But most important for Bosnia is the end of Yugoslavia, which basically became the largest ground war in Europe since the current Ukrainian crisis. In the subsequent war that split up Yugoslavia based on ethnic and religious lines, Bosnia was easily the hardest hit, experiencing one of the most tragic ethnic cleansings in the modern era, as well as something that's left an impression on the people, and specifically on the Bosnian government and how it recognizes its current history. It is to be noted that this was a tragedy on an international scale, but the Bosnian people, being incredibly resilient, have moved past this, have addressed it, and are moving forward into a more positive, more modern, and more peaceful future. There are, of course, great museums and great historical artifacts that you can learn more about this specific time. I'm not going to dive into the details of the Balkan Wars for this video for this purposes. It's a travel guide, but it's important to know and it's important to recognize why the things are as they are in certain Bosnian cities. And it would be a missed opportunity if you went to Bosnia and didn't investigate this very interesting but very tragic part of European history. That being said, Bosnia is one of the most beautiful countries in all of Europe. I'm going to stand by that. I took the most amazing train, which I'll tell you about later. And I'm going to tell you more about that in the practical section. Visas. Americans can stay in Bosnia and Herzegovina visa-free for up to 90 days. The good news also is that it's not in the Schengen zone, the greater EU free movement zone. So that means a trip to Bosnia and Herzegovina has zero effect on your trip to France, to Germany, and to the Netherlands. Money. In Bosnia, they use something called the Bosnian convertible mark. I think it's a pretty interesting name. And the currency is actually incredibly stable and stays about basically like one Bosnian convertible mark to like 50 euro cents or about 60 American cents. The reason they do this is because they don't have the strongest national bank and they'd like to just peg it to the euro. So it basically never changes. It just fluctuates with whatever the euro is doing to the international market. Bosnia itself is one of the more cheaper, cost-effective countries that you can travel to in Greater Europe. You can probably eat a pretty reasonable dinner for less than 10 euros, getting definitely the meat, maybe some dips and sides and all that other stuff. Hotel rooms, hostel stays are pretty reasonably priced. You can get a reasonable hotel for anywhere around 40 to 70 US dollars. If you want to stay somewhere nicer, of course, it's going to be a higher price point, specifically in Sarajevo, the capital city. If you're staying in a hostel, it's not unheard of to get a hostel room for less than $15, maybe even less than $8, depending on the quality of the hostel. Transportation. If you want to get to Bosnia by plane, you have a couple options. You can fly to Sarajevo, the capital city. That's going to land you right in the heart of the country. And then from Sarajevo, you can get to basically everywhere, as it's really like in the center of Bosnia. You can go north, you can go south by bus, you can take trains. There's a lot of options for you. Next, you can fly into a city called Tuzla. Tuzla is that Ryanair Wizz Air airport, the budget travel airport. So if you're trying to get there cheaply, flying to Tuzla is reasonable. It's not necessarily close to Sarajevo. So if your plan is to go to Sarajevo, you can of course get there by bus, which could of course take some time. You could rent a car, it's certainly possible. But if your plan is to just go see some Bosnia, Tuzla is a good place to fly to. Lastly, you can fly into the city called Banja Luka, which is the capital of the Republic of Srpska. Now, not to get into too much detail, but it is important to note that Bosnia and Herzegovina is a single country, but it is sort of split into two nations to keep everyone sort of happy. Bosnia and Herzegovina represents the Bosniak and Croat population and controls X part of the country. The Republic of Srpska controls the Serbs who live in Bosnia. It's about 35-40%, and they control the other Y part of the country. They work in harmony in a sort of unity government, but the Republic of Srpska is administered differently than Bosnia and Herzegovina. It has nothing to do with your travel issues, with your visas, with all that good stuff. So you're totally fine seeing all these different places. But it is something to note that's very particular about this union country rather than a country that flies one banner and has one understanding. A trip to Bosnia and Herzegovina is also easily accessed from other Balkan countries. If you want to make a large Balkan trip, you can of course go from Croatia and specifically Dubrovnik, which is a very popular city in the southern part of Croatia. If you want to go directly to Mostar in Bosnia, it's actually a very close and very reasonable trip. Also, if you want to drive in from Serbia, from the northern part of Croatia, or from Montenegro, it's very reasonable to do so. There are domestic flights that go in and out. Bosnia is pretty mountainous. It actually kind of feels like this in a lot of the country, so roads are sometimes not good. It's very mountainous, so sometimes it's quite slow. Buses are a little bit slow. It gets quite cold, sometimes a little bit like snowy in the winter, so take all that into account when planning a trip. If you're planning to drive in terrain like this, just make sure you know what you're doing. Bosnian drivers are a little bit crazy in their old Yugo cars. It's pretty cool, but it's very different than the United States. So I think renting a car in Bosnia is great because you get to explore the great outdoors on your own sort of accord. It's a good plan. The trains are fantastic. One of the best trains I've personally been on in my life was from Sarajevo to Mostar because it cuts through mountain regions and it cuts through river valleys. So gorgeous. So now on to my favorite section, which is food. And Bosnia is super special because Bosnia has some of arguably the best food in Europe and is a leader in cuisine. Let me tell you why. Number one, on a trip to Bosnia, you have to try Sarajevo-style burek. Sarajevo-style burek, just like any other burek that you're going to find in the former Ottoman Empire, is phyllo dough stuffed with maybe meat, maybe some type of feta-type cheese with some spinach, something like that. And they typically drink it with ayran, which is a drink made from yogurt. It's just very thin, salted yogurt. It really originally comes from Sarajevo itself and has then disseminated itself through these various countries. If you go to Istanbul and you want to find the best burek in Istanbul, many people say go to the Bosnian neighborhood. And the way that the Bosnians in Sarajevo make is it in a big spiral. Super crunchy, great for breakfast, and honestly, you can get a big chunk for like $2, and it will definitely hit your calorie count for the day. So good, one of my favorite foods you're going to find anywhere. On a trip to Bosnia, you're going to note that the cuisine looks very more akin to the Middle East than it does to Central and Southeastern Europe. And the reason for that is that Ottoman influence and then some of the Bosnian influence that's been left on Ottoman cuisine in general. One of the best things you can try is cevapcici, which are these little kebab-like things served with fresh onion, some chili, and some bread called lepina, which is like a nice, fluffy kind of flatbread. It's not flat, but it's a little puffy. They put kaymak on there. Kaymak is the cream that comes to the top of yogurt when you make it. And it's so decadent, so rich, so delicious. It's really like maybe one of the best things out there. And not unlike its other Balkan neighbors, you can find great grilled meats, specifically cevapcici, in every city, in every corner of every street that you go to. And it's just delightful. Lastly, in Bosnia, I think you're going to find awesome Ottoman-style desserts. They do the sort of Turkic coffee in the small cup that's very thick and very rich. You're going to find ravani, which is a semolina cake soaked in sugar. You're going to find beautiful baklava. You're going to find kadaifi, which is phyllo strips that are very thin and then stacked very similarly to baklava. And you're going to find something really nice that I only found in Bosnia called tufahia. And tufahia I actually made for my channel where I cook all the dishes from all around the world. Tufahia is an apple that's sort of poached in sort of like sugar water and then has nuts and dates on the inside and is topped with some whipped cream. I think the cuisine of Bosnia has left a huge impression on many of the countries around it. And when we think of some types of Serbian food, Croatian food, Slovenian food, or even what's normalized in Turkey today, a lot of that stems from the cuisine of the Bosnians. And that is something that is notable and delicious. All right, so in this last section, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some really cool things that you should see on a trip to Bosnia. If you are prioritizing like a 10-day trip, I think that would be awesome. The country has a lot to offer, a lot to see, a lot of natural beauty, and then the cities are also very interesting if you're more of a culture traveler. So number one, you have to check out the cities. You have to go to Sarajevo. They have really good museums for a lot of different facets. They have good history museums. They have very good recognition about the Yugoslav Balkan Wars. They have, of course, the World War I sort of situation with Archduke Franz Ferdinand and this bridge. And then the city is like really interesting. It's like two major slopes, and then the city runs in between this sort of valley. It sort of looks like if Turkey and Austria had a baby, and I think that that's super unique. The food is good, really good restaurants. You can taste rakia there, which is, of course, one of my favorite alcohols. I had the best rakia flight of my life in Sarajevo. all these different wild berries that they converted into this beautiful alcohol, with some of the best food that you can find anywhere. It's a really nice city, a really cool city with very interesting architecture. I'd say Ottoman-style architecture in a lot of senses, but it is very Bosnian and it's very special. A city that you should definitely see. It was also home to the 1984 Winter Olympics, I believe. And they have some Olympic stuff. You can go up on the mountain. You can see some of the old Olympic, the old Olympic things. And this is also a city where I was able to explore some of the old Yugoslav past. I took a really great tour that described the Balkan Wars and also some of the Yugoslav issues. And you can go to bunkers, you can go to some of the fields where they had some of the planes and the tanks and all this other stuff that the Yugoslavs built, and a little bit more about the Yugoslav society in general. Very worth it, very good time in Sarajevo. That being said, there are also other great cities you can see, as well as small towns, but I think Banja Luka, if you want to see the Republic of Srpska, another very interesting city. I think Mostar in the southwest towards Dubrovnik is maybe the most beautiful city of Bosnia. It has this old bridge, the Stari Most, where it's like an old Ottoman bridge. It sort of goes up like this. The actual one was actually destroyed. They've rebuilt it, destroyed in a war. Very, very beautiful. And there is actually a competition where people jump off of this thing, like dive off, and it is like 50 meters tall. It's very impressive. But the city itself is a sort of an old Ottoman style construction, very Turkic builds, I would say. Architecture is beautiful, rugs, lamps, really good food, and it's in the nature, in the mountains like this. It's very hard to find a more unique UNESCO style heritage city anywhere in the world, honestly. If you make your way out of the city, one of the best day trips you can do from Sarajevo is to go to Blagaj Tekia. And basically this is a dervish monastery. Dervishes were this mystical form of Islam that appeared in the Ottoman Empire, but specifically a lot in the Balkans. It sits under sort of a mountain canopy. There's an old mosque on the top, and then there's this beautiful Ottoman-style monastery that is so beautiful along a river. It can really get you out into the mountains, and something else to do when you're out in Bosnia is to see waterfalls, go trekking, and experience the outdoors. I think that's maybe the most charming part of Bosnia, besides the very unique cities that are very different than the rest of continental Europe. The most popular waterfalls you can go visit are called the Kravica waterfalls, near a small town called Ljubuški. I think that's right. Probably like not the best pronunciation, but the waterfalls are massive. They're in the mountains. It's green. It's fresh. Good mountain air. I don't know. If you like trekking, I think Bosnia is arguably sort of like the Alps of the Balkans. So you can really walk around and really explore the old great outdoors, and then have a cultural experience in the cities. That's why I like Bosnia. Good food, really nice people, very interesting history, like to learn about respectively. And then the outdoor situation is very beautiful as well. So it's really a one country that you can hit all of these things: waterfalls, rivers, lakes. The only thing you can't really do is go to the coast, but Bosnia does own like 20 kilometers of coast near the, well, I guess connected via Croatia. When you go to the southern part of Croatia, you actually have to stop in Bosnia for 20 kilometers and then get re-stamped out to go back to the southern tip of Croatia. So it's a really all-encompassing place with so much to offer, and that's why I always like to describe these places to you that maybe people don't often put on their list. I would say Bosnia should be on the list of anyone who wants to go to a European country, see some really interesting history, and then just like get out of the usual going to Paris, going to London, going to Barcelona thing. So I think that's going to do it for me in this video. I really enjoy making these videos. I really enjoy Bosnia, and I would love to help people explore it the right way. That being said, a like and subscribe would help me out dearly, and thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, you're a legend. I'll see you in the next one.